When folks come to practice, they usually walk through the door with a long board on their shoulder. Yeah? It's a blinder. So they look around and they see self and other, good and bad, up and down, practice and non-practice. So you offer some gentle encouragement, and take that board and we move it to the other shoulder. Oh, just see this. No separation. Excellent intimacy. Yeah? Infinite wonder. Nothing to grasp onto and no one to do the grasping. And that's a good start. With time, there has to be integration that takes place, right? We have to take the board completely off of our shoulder and be able to see how both work together. But even when we move the board to the other shoulder and we lose that conceptual grasp of what's present, something often remains, a form of grasping. We see past, we see future, and those point to some conceptual idea of what is present. But the issue is, when we carve things up that way, when we're constantly ruminating about the past or being anxious about what's going to be in the future, there's no time for the present. We lose the present in that. There's a case about this. It's the 81st case of the Shōyōroku. It's called Gensha Comes to Province. And it begins, attention. Master Gensha arrived at Hoden Province and was received with many kinds of entertainment. The next day he asked Venerable Shōdo, where did all of yesterday's festivities go? And Shōdo, at this, lifted a corner of his robe. Gensha remarked, there's no relation between them at all. What a case, yeah? All kinds of what seem very cryptic things being pointed to. And yet, if we approach it from that place, beyond labels and judgments, things become clear. So Gensha, the master being referred to, lived in China at the end of the 9th century, and he was a disciple of Master Seppo. Now, for those of you who've been systematically looking at the koans, you'll know Seppo, because he and Ganto worked together in the case where Tokusan carried his bowls, right? And Seppo was left to wonder, what is the last word? What is the last word? And so in this case, now you're seeing him much later on. You're seeing one of his students grappling with something, a very similar, concern, so to speak. Very similar question. Gensha, the student of Seppo's, was a fisherman, and his father was a fisherman as well. And they were out at sea together one time, and they had an accident, and his father fell out of the boat and into the sea. And Gensha toiled for some time to try to save his father, but he couldn't. That's how he lost him. And after his father drowned, he kind of was lost for a while. He's left behind in remorse and despair. And so he decided to become a monk and to practice Zen and to get some idea about how these awful things transpire and what the way of liberation is. The issue is that he was practicing with a whole bunch of other novice monks, and so he was considered quite elderly. He was actually in his 30s at the time. Right? And maybe his life experience helped him to understand his practice and open to this great question of life and death. But he wound up under Seppo achieving or awakening quite extensively. But his actual experience of awakening was interesting. He was on a pilgrimage, and he was walking, and he stubbed his toe on a rock. Just then he cried out in pain. And his enlightenment experience was, he thought to himself, if everything is empty, then where does this pain come from? And just then, he woke up. He recognized the direct intimacy of things. Later on, when he became a teacher, he was teaching a layman named Kyo. And Kyo wanted to know how he could put his energies into the practice of Zen. Yeah? And so just then, Gensha said, "Kyo!" And Kyo said, "Well, yes, master?" Gensha said, "Do you hear the sound of the bubbling brook outside of the window?" And he said, "Well, yeah, yes, I do." Gensha said, "Enter Zen from there. Enter Zen from there." Sometime later, another student came to Gensha and said, "That was a marvelous teaching, but what if there wasn't a babbling brook outside the window to point to?" Yeah. And Gensha called out the student's name, "Chu!" He said, "Yes." He said, "Enter Zen from there." So wherever our lived experience is, even this question of puzzlement or doubt, enter Zen from there. Having a hard time getting over the death of a loved one, enter Zen from there. Having concerns about where your life is headed, enter Zen from there. But this case is exemplary of this practice. Master Gensha arrives at Hoden province and is received with many kinds of entertainment. Aren't we all? Yeah? There's things in our life that are so pleasurable that we just want to cling to them. There's also a lot of things that are very painful that we experience too. We want to push those away as much as we can. The next day, he goes to Shoto, his student, and says, "Where did all of yesterday's festivities go?" We often ask ourselves this question, right? How do I get rid of all this pain from my childhood? All this suffering I encountered at the hands of my mother, my father, my husband. What about all these wounds, all these pain that I'm carrying? Those, it seems like they're always with us, because the things that we try so desperately to push away cling to us. We try to bury them somewhere in the depths of our past, only to recognize they're always present. But the things we want to cling to seem to elude us. But even the state of longing is a deep recognition that those things aren't absent. They're always present. So even when we're able to move to the place where we recognize that the self and other, these ideas of good and bad, are just our labels, our judgments, and we can put them in mu, we also have to reckon with this how we position ourselves in time. And to begin to recognize that past, future, present, they're just ways of carving things up from the position of intellect, from conceptual understanding. The past and the future are always right here in the present. Sometimes when we drive, we look through the windshield. Sometimes we look in the rear view mirror. Sometimes we take a look over our shoulder and actually look through the window. But yet they're all there. We relate to them differently, or apparently differently, and yet they're all in the same place. So when he asked the question about where did all yesterday's festivities go, Shoto lifts the corner of his robe. What's he saying? Here it is. Yeah? Enter Zen right here. Here it is. It's right here. It's as close as the hem of your garment, maybe even closer. It's always right here. I think it's a pretty powerful answer. It's not somewhere else. We have this notion that the past is somehow immutable and the future is uncertain. But if we leave off on the ideas of past and future, we begin to recognize that it's all very malleable. That we can step into all of the events of our life throughout space and time, right here and right now. Kind of alchemy emerges. The past is not immutable. Someone could do something very awful and put themselves in prison. Yeah. They wind up in prison, they say, oh, this is a very bad thing. It'll be on my record for the rest of my life. This is bad. And while they're in prison, maybe they deepen their practice. They make a difference for the people around them. And they begin to appreciate the fact that, hey, this being put in prison was perhaps a very good thing. You can hold both at the same time. The past can be changed. And the future is always right here in the present. And if you're longing after the future, then I promise you, you've got a future of longing. Yeah? But if you can just work to actualize what your intentions are right here in the present, the future that you long for is already here. But then we're left with something very enigmatic. Yeah? So we would think that Shoto lifting the corner of his robe would be a very good response, and perhaps Gensha would approve. And yet Gensha says there's no relation between them at all. Do you shoot him down? Do you tell him, hey, that wasn't the right response? Gensha says, when you can practice in this way, when you've truly appreciated it, then there's nothing to relate to and no one to do the relating. Any idea or question or doubt, and when I talk about doubt, I mean cynical doubt, dissolves into wonder. Yeah? There's no requirement for approval or disapproval, and there's no one to do the approval or disapproval. All relations of that kind disappear, and we're truly actualized by what's present. We become the medicine. We become Avalokiteshvara. We become the compassion that's required in this very moment to knit together the things that have been cleaved apart. So there's no longer anything to stand in relation. There's no longer anything to regret and no one to do the regretting. That's our practice. That's a deep approval from Gensha. But only if you don't cling to that too. Then the one who's puffed up emerges, and you have to go through the practice again. But this is a constant coming back. Lather, rinse, repeat. Walking through the great cosmic sand trap, you're constantly raking behind you so that your footprints go away, right? And you don't leave something for someone else to trip on, including that self, right, that attaches to these things so well. So when we're sitting and things from the past are emerging, or our hopes for the future are emerging, all of those things are transformed by stepping radically into what's present. Just taking a deep breath, taking a deep look around, recognizing that when we see other, that we've actually just created a fiction there, and stepping in and becoming the compassion required to hold together all of that we've cast away or forsaken. This is your life. It's no dress rehearsal. Step into this moment, burn yourself up in your practice. And in so you'll recommend your true face to yourself. You'll see what it is that you've been missing. It's never far away.